Hi, good afternoon. My name's Jennifer Dotson. I'm the founder and program coordinator for Highland Park Poetry, and I'm also your host today for Poetry Today. My guest is Al DeGeneva. Albert DeGeneva is a prize-winning poet, editor, teacher, and blues saxophonist. He's the author of 2 books of poetry, The Bluing Hours and Backbeat, and 3 chapbooks, A Tender Spot, Postcards to Jack, and most recently, A Good Hammer, which is a limited edition handmade letterpress imprint from Timberline Press. He has a new collection, Fishnets and Saxophones, which will be published this fall by Purple Flag Press. Between 1978 and 1980, he was the editor of Oyez Review, published by Roosevelt University. And in June of 2000, he launched the literary arts journal After Hours, for which he continues as both publisher and editor. Geneva is half of the performance poetry duo Avant Retro with Charlie Rossiter, which has appeared through the Midwest and greater Chicago area. He received his MFA in writing from Spalding University, and that's Louisville, Kentucky.
Right.
Okay. He currently teaches at Concordia University in River Forest, Illinois, and is now co-leading the annual Norbert Bly Writing Workshop at the Clearing Folk School in Ellison Bay, Wisconsin. And for over 10 years, he's been the co-host with Nina Corwin of the monthly Traveling Molly's reading series in Forest Park, Illinois. And he's a one-time contributing editor to Downbeat magazine. So you have a very full and varied resume with many, many creative hats.
Yes, and there's probably even more to put into there.
Well, I'd like to just get started and have you read a poem for all of our audience who may be unfamiliar with your work.
This is a poem it's a really great way to start a reading, and I've often started readings this way. I had the pleasure of going to a writing workshop in Boulder, Colorado at the Naropa University, which is a Buddhist university, and of course everything revolves around mindfulness. So this poem is called Dr. Seuss Mindfulness. Play, play I say, play in the trees, play on your knees, play with the tassels on the lamp, make sand castles on your lap. Play monkey, play frisbee, do somersaults with a birdie. Play, I say, every day. Play with yourself, make matchbook towers on the shelf, tickle her feet, scratch his belly, play with the berries in the jelly. Play with your toes, not the tail of your shirt, play with your hair, no one will care. Sit on your flip-flops, squirt the ketchup, roll down a hill to get dizzy, get fizzy, be whizzy, say Lizzie, twirl your dress. Make a mess, spill the beans, spit the peas, swirl the wine, take your time, buy purple flowers, kiss in the shower, play, play, play.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, it's very playful.
Yes.
You know, all the
Yes.
the
Poetry can tend to get serious, so I think it's good to start with something fun sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was really intrigued that you're a blues saxophonist. And I wonder, do you find that there's a connection between your music and your writing, or I don't know, is it a different part of your brain, or?
No, it's very much the same part of my brain, and I was a musician probably longer than I was a poet, but the two kind of developed side by side through high school into college, and playing, music and listening to music is definitely tuned my ear for my poetry. So many people comment that my poetry feels very musical, and I think that's because I have a pretty good sense of jazz and blues, and I'm always hearing rhythms. So
I was going to say rhythms. Yeah,
yes.
That's got to be. And is that also perhaps your attraction to the beat poets? You seem in some of the things that I've read about you. You wrote that book about. Is the beat back your?
Backbeat.
Backbeat.
It's actually a memoir with poetry, and it was actually co-authored with Charlie Rossiter. So the publisher was Norbert Bly, and he gave us the assignment to each write separately a memoir just relating our beat influences, because as Avant Retro, when we perform, it's very much a kind of a beatnik show. And yes, I was very heavily influenced by Kerouac and Ginsberg and the whole group of writers from the late 50s, early 60s. And so I've studied them pretty carefully. And I don't know that it's so much my musical interest as just my affinity for their writing.
Okay.
But of course, Kerouac and that crew were big jazz fans, so that just
Okay.
helps, you know.
Right. Well, and obviously, I can tell that your postcards to Jack. I'm
Yeah,
assuming
that's a direct conversation with Kerouac
Okay.
in that book. So.
very cool. And I'm very excited about Fishnets and Saxophones. What a great title.
Yeah, the subhead of that title is a poetry of love, sex, and regret. So
okay.
it's completely relationship type poetry.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So and what is it? This is a new publisher that you're working with, Purple Flag Press. Where are they
Yeah.
based?
Well, they're based in Chicago, and
Okay.
actually it's an imprint of Virtual Artists Collective. And Virtual Artists published my book, The Bluing Hours.
Okay.
And another imprint of Virtual Artists is Timberline. So actually,
okay.
this is the third book from the same
Oh, all
publisher,
right.
but under different imprints. Yeah,
But
so.
do you work with the same editor or editors,
The-
or is there?
Yeah, the lead editor, his name is Steve Schrader, and
Mhm.
he lives here in Chicago. And but he has a group of readers, so there's an
Mhm.
editorial board, and I think it differs slightly from imprint to imprint. But
Okay.
he's always involved as pretty much the first reader.
Oh,
so-
right. So you just submit you write a manuscript and then you say, hey, check it out.
That's-
Or
yeah.
do they invite you, and since you've had such a long-standing relationship with them? Or
The third book now, that was invitation to people who had been on Virtual
Oh,
Artists
okay.
before.
Okay.
The first one, The Bluing Hours, that was very much, I just sent in a manuscript and said, what do you think?
Mhm.
So,
And magic.
yeah, and it happened, yeah.
Well, do you having worked with him previously, then do you find when so they've accepted your book, are they involved in shaping the manuscript in any way, or are you expected to have sort of a polished, beautiful?
It's, they make suggestions,
Okay.
here and there, but pretty much I try to polish it as much
Mhm.
as I can before it gets into their hands. And then they, they'll work with layout and things like that. We might reorder things here and there where it makes sense. But, and sometimes I like to I'll reorder things because when the book lays out, I don't like people to have to turn a page in the middle of a
Okay.
poem. So,
You mean like if it's a poem
Yeah.
that's 2 pages, or
yeah,
that?
I'd
okay,
like it
gotcha.
to be a spread instead of somebody having to turn the page. It's just
Sure.
a personal preference, and I
Yeah.
do that with After Hours too in the magazine.
Okay.
So.
Well, I was going to say you have a lot of editing and publishing
Mhm.
experience with both Oh Yay
Yeah.
and then with After Hours. So, I mean, now when you're writing, I don't know, is your hat, are the hats that you wear as the poet always influenced? Do you have the editor sitting on your shoulder all the time, or are you?
It's it's kind of the editor hat, wants to judge,
Mhm.
and the writer hat just wants to write. So I have to push the editor back when I'm
Mhm.
writing something new, because you should just let it flow the first
Yeah.
time out, and I can do that pretty well. I've been doing it long enough. The editor side of me checks in after when I start revising
Okay.
and shaping, and I enjoy that. That's why I do it. I like to read poems carefully and think about them, make judgments, and it's, of course, the magazine ends up being personal taste. All literary journals it's
Right.
the personal taste of the editor, so that's why it's always good to be familiar with it before.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about After Hours and sort of how did that
Sure, sure.
get started? I mean, obviously, I mentioned, as you mentioned
Yeah.
in the bio, that it started in 2000. What was the impetus for?
Well, there was it was the late 90s, and Charlie and I were doing a lot of performing all over the place. And we started a reading series at the Buzz Cafe in Oak Park, and it was called Buzz After Hours.
Okay.
And so we ran that reading series for about a year, but in that time, being in so many open mics and readings and hanging out with a lot of different poets around Chicago, I realized that many of the Chicago poets weren't getting published very widely, and a lot of good poets were getting rejected pretty regularly from some of the bigger magazines on either coast. So I thought there was a place for a literary journal that focused on Chicago writers, which is what After Hours is all about. We focus on Chicago writers and artists. And it's not writing about Chicago, it's just by Chicagoans. And, you know, and we stretch that to be, you know, Chicago expats and sister cities here
Okay,
and there.
all right.
Because the new issue has a number of people from Prague in there. My co-editor spent nearly 10 years living in Prague, so she's got a lot of
Okay.
connections there. And it just happens to be a sister city of
For Chicago.
So we
Okay.
have a few people from there in this issue. And but anyway, you know, the whole idea was, you know, I thought that, or I felt that Chicago poets weren't really getting their due, or people didn't appreciate our voice as a Midwestern voice in poetry and fiction too. So I started the journal, and as it turned out, over the years, we've published a lot of people for the first time, and they've gone on to do bigger, better things, publishing books and things. So proud of that. And so we've basically, you know, starting in 2000, created an archive of Chicago writing at the turn of the 21st century, which is really what it's become now. And now we're, you know, the University of Chicago archives the magazine in the library.
Oh, wow.
So that was a big step to when they took on the magazine.
Well, it
So-
feels like acceptance, you know?
Yeah, right, exactly.
The establishment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not just, you know, well, being around 16 years is, you know, that's a long time for
Yeah.
a literary magazine.
Sure.
And so we're up to our number 32. So it's
Right.
a lot of people. So
Well, True Confessions, I feel very honored to be included in the
yes,
this
you've been a
current-
couple times.
Yeah, this is the second poem that I've
Mhm.
had included in there, so
Yes.
I was very excited.
Yeah, happy to
Um,
have you.
Well, thanks. But let's hear some more of your writing.
Okay.
That would be
Okay. I'll read one poem from Postcards to Jack. Postcards to Jack is it's called a nostos book, which means it's a journey home. So they're, you know, not like on the road. I wasn't trying to do that. Actually, I was playing with a Japanese form called haibun, which was started by Basho, and it's a prose poem followed by a haiku.
okay.
So this book, and when Basho did it, they were primarily travel poems. So these are, in my day job, I did a lot of traveling. So different places I've been come up in the book. But there's a number of places where Kerouac is addressed directly. So I'll read the last poem in the book, which is the Getting Home, the last poem. And it talks to Jack directly, and just there's a reference here to Ma Mère, which is what Jack called his mother. So this is from Postcards to Jack, called Time to Go. Every cafe closes. The waiter finishes his last cigarette, tells you politely to pick up your lousy notebook. It's time to leave. Sometimes you stand outside back doors too long. You become a red check flannel shirt hanging limp on a hook. You're outside the circle of bar jokes and baptisms and wee hour lovemaking. Sometimes it's just time to go home. Go, Jack, to your cats, where Ma Mère irons your shirts and makes your highballs. I think it's time. My grass at home needs cutting. The deck needs cleaning. I have to go now. Put this box of sad souvenirs away in my closet, behind the beat-old gym shoes and silk ties fallen from their plastic hangers. I miss her warm thigh against my hip. There is pasticcio baking in the oven. Roses are blooming over my arbor. So
Wow.
that's
neat.
Getting Home.
Yes, okay. Time to go back and tend those things.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, neat. Very cool. So you mentioned your day job. Is that, do you mind mentioning what it is your day job?
I
I'm just
do. Well, I
curious.
do marketing communications. So
Oh, okay.
So I write.
So you're actually writing,
No,
using
I-
words all the
Yeah,
time.
no, I've been lucky.
There's no
to,
escape.
Yeah, no, I've been lucky to build a career on my writing ability. So started out as a journalist and moved into public relations and then marketing. So that's what I do as a day gig. So I balance that on top of, or underneath everything else, I should say.
Right. Yeah. Well, and now, so you also have the teacher hat.
Yeah.
And in what's the college in River Forest?
Concordia.
Concordia. Do you teach poetry specifically there, or other writing classes? Or
Actually,
other?
there, teaching marketing, as a
Oh,
matter
okay.
of fact. And in my writing teaching, I do workshops primarily, and I just finished 2 weeks ago the Norbert Bly writing workshop up in Door County, which I do every year. Well, I started as a student there, and now I'm leading the class. So it's been the last 4 years since Norbert Bly passed away, and that's really, I really love that. I work on it pretty much all year long for this, this week-long class. And then
how is that structured, sort of?
It's a week-long class. There's basically 2 parts to the class, and there's kind of a section, the afternoon basically, where more advanced writers, and there I always pick a literary subject. We'll do a little deeper dive into a certain kind of literature for that year, because we'll get repeat students for that class. And we'll talk about different aspects of writing, and from a specific group. Last year was confessional poets. This year I did writing in rhythm, so that covered a lot of things from Langston Hughes to the hip hop poets today. So that was fun. And then I work with each of the students individually on current writing projects. Then the morning class is kind of an exploring creative writing for people who feel that they have the urge to write but are not sure what they like to write. And I really enjoy that, because people come in thinking they don't know what they're doing. By the end of the week, they can't stop writing.
Oh, wow.
So we explore. We start small with haiku and get up to short fiction by the end of the week, and just let people experiment and explore. So.
Very cool. Very neat. I was also going to ask you about the Traveling Molly series. You've also been doing that for
a long time.
Really long time.
Yeah, that was, and I do that with Nina Corwin, and that's the second Monday of every month. So out in the western suburbs, and we've established quite a nice following of people that come every month, and it kind of changes, but we have our regulars, and now we're for a long time we had one feature every month, a featured writer. Now we're doing 2 features. Basically, the opening act, if you want to call it that, is a returning feature, because we've been doing it so long. There's people that we'd like to ask back. They have new work, and it's maybe 10 years since they've read for us. So we'll bring in a new feature, and now we have a bit of an opening act, so which is fun, and that keeps usually those people have become regulars, or in some way regulars.
Well, speaking of readings and features, I'm very glad that you're going to be a feature for Highland Park Poetry this fall at Madame Zuzu's. I think it's November 22nd.
That sounds right.
It's like the 3rd Saturday in November at Madame Zuzu's, and
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes. Now, will your fishnets and saxophones be ready by then?
Maybe. I hope so.
Oh,
I hope so.
That would be great.
I hope so.
Can we hear some more?
Sure. I thought I'd read a relationship poem. Why not?
Okay.
And this is when your longer term relationships tend to take on different aspects over time, of course, as we know. So this poem started as kind of a riff on a Pablo Neruda poem, and the title is "After Reading Neruda's 20 Love Songs That Are Fewer Than Our Years Together. Tonight I write the saddest lines, in the small of your back where it is wet from my tongue, my finger shaping letters against the nap of your soft down that resists the words we have loved and not loved, we have joined and released, fire feeding earth, air breathing water. We are a thunderstorm of flesh against flesh, tongue to rain to ice to lightning ignited, and smiles exploded, teeth heavy as sleet, shaping words that are not love, our love. Tonight I write the saddest lines that mark the hours of sleepless darkness staring. You cannot read the silly silhouettes of vowels traced along your spine, the long weary line of sometimes you love me with venom, sometimes laughing, sometimes dancing over broken stones, sometimes begging for the light to be shut off, sometimes you love me with sleep. Tonight I write in the small of your back, tracing your hip with exclamations and questions and sad ellipses and lonely empty spaces between I and love and you, so many words when all you ask is quiet.
Oh, wow.
Long, many years of loving.
Yeah.
So,
That's lots of emotional history
yeah, of course.
embedded
Yeah.
in that. Yeah.
Like I said, over 20.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I like the silly silhouettes.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not an expected. Obviously, the rhyme at the sort of at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just sort of the combination just
Yeah,
struck
and
me
I,
as
and I liked that
interesting.
one because it was fun playing with sounds. There's a lot
Mhm.
of sounds in that poem, so
Yeah.
my ear got tuned to the way the words were flowing through. So.
Very, very cool. You've mentioned Charlie Rossiter a couple of times. What was it? And with the Avant Retro, that was a performance. So was it just reading? You mentioned that it was sort of echoing the beat stuff.
Yeah, well, it was a duo,
Mhm.
and Charlie had worked. He lived in Albany, New York, and he had a group there called Three Guys from Albany, which was performance poetry. And when he moved to Chicago, he was kind of looking for a new partner.
Okay.
So when he and I, we met at an open mic, and then he realized that I played saxophone. He played percussion, so it was kind of a natural
Oh,
beat
yeah.
thing. So
Okay.
not every poem would be, accompanied by music, but sometimes he would accompany my work with percussion, and sometimes I would accompany him with the saxophone. So we had this and if you know what Charlie looks like, he looks like
Okay.
a good old hippie. So,
Okay.
so it was fun. We did coffee houses and libraries. We did festivals. We did the Chicago Blues Festival, and we
Oh,
traveled
wow.
around.
Okay.
We were in Detroit and Madison, and we did a couple times. We went to Paterson, New Jersey, with the Paterson Literary Review, who had published both of us at different
okay.
times, brought us in to do readings at the Passaic County Junior College, and then we did readings in high schools, and so that was fun. A couple times we did that.
But now that he has moved.
He moved to Vermont,
Mhm.
so obviously we're not going to be performing like we used to. Hopefully,
Yeah.
maybe we'll do some sort of
Should do a
reunion
reunion
tour,
Yes,
or
I was
something
gonna
like
say,
that.
right. We're
Either
back together
here or
again,
there, or maybe
yeah.
up in Door County or wherever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. That would be great. That's right. Are you originally from Louisville, or you just went
No,
to school
no,
there? You
no,
said
that
you
was-
broke up. You
Yeah.
grew up in.
I grew up
the
in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, and when I decided I wanted to get my MFA, and I did that for two reasons. One of the reasons was not teaching, which many people get their MFA to
Okay.
teach. I decided I wanted to be a better editor and a better writer. So I found a brief residency program that was. The criteria was I needed someplace close enough to drive, so I wouldn't have to fly.
Okay.
And so Louisville was. The program at Spalding was just beginning when I started there. It was only in its fourth year. So it's still a fairly new program.
Uh-huh.
Now it's fully baked and a waiting list to get in.
Okay.
So,
Oh wow. Very nice.
but it was a great experience. Learned a lot. Had some really fine teachers. And
Now, was that a segue to your becoming an editor with the
no,
Roosevelt?
no,
Or, okay,
no.
that was a
The-
separate.
This was more recently. It was the
Oh, okay.
early 2000s when I
Okay,
went back
all
to
right.
school to get my master's.
What was the? Why did you feel that you needed to get a master's, or was it just that you wanted to explore?
No, I didn't
deep-
feel I needed it.
Yeah.
I enjoy learning,
Yeah,
and the experience of focused poetry time.
Mm-hmm.
With faculty that are poetry teachers and poets themselves, and a community of poets, and that was important. I learned a lot and grew a lot as a writer through that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different schools of thought on MFA programs. Some people
Mm-hmm.
think it ruins your writing. There's also people who feel that there's certain poems that are over workshopped, which happens in MFA
Okay.
programs. But being a mature student at the time, I was very aware of my writing.
Some of the pitfalls.
Yeah,
And I see your voice.
Yeah, I had
Okay.
already pretty much established my own poetic voice, so
Mhm.
I knew what I wanted to do and how I wanted to write. So I was able not to let that happen. Though I do know what over workshopping does. I have one poem in particular that I had really liked, and took everybody's advice in workshopping, and now I hate the poem. So you know, so
awful.
and you know, you were talking about losing something on your computer. That was a poem that I lost the original version.
Oh, no.
So I could never go back to the original, and it just, you know, I kind of lost the original feel by too much workshopping, and that that can happen. You know, you have to believe in the poem, and as you write the poem, it gets its own voice, and you have to let it do its own singing. You know, so if you go back and try and quiet it or put it in a box, it's the wrong approach.
That's interesting, because I mean, one of the benefits of the workshopping is that you're not in isolation. So much of the time when we're writing, we're in isolation, we're in our own heads, so it's good to get feedback, but it's also a danger too.
You have to filter it too. And oh no, the feedback from your peers is wonderful, and you need it, and you know, because when you do write in isolation, you don't know what the world is going to read. You know, then sometimes you think you've said what you wanted to say, and nobody else gets it.
Yeah.
So you have to test it a little bit. But as I said, there is a point where you might overcraft, you know, and so you know, I'm careful about that, and I try when I'm teaching or in a workshop with people not to have such forceful opinions on poems that it takes away from the heart of the poem, you know. So you can make suggestions where things are absolutely wrong. Somebody said something wrong, or a word is, you know, it's poor word choice. Those kinds of things are different than changing the shape of the poem or the rhythm of the poem.
Do you give comments as well for, like, when you're reading for as an editor, or when people, or is that too much?
We have here and there, when there was, you know, maybe something that we really liked but thought that something was missing, or the end was bad, or, you know, we'll make that sort of suggestion. But in general, for the magazine, we don't really make editorial, you know, comments. We get enough to fill our pages, and then there isn't enough time in the day to write comments on everybody's submissions.
Yeah. Right.
But there are certain things that we just feel are so good, and this happened a couple times with, you know, writers who may be a little less experienced, younger writers who just needed some suggestions. So, and it's rare that somebody says, no, you know, if you tell them, I want to, you know, we'll publish it if you consider these changes. Usually people consider the changes.
Right. Well, they're, to be published, right? That's show business. You know, you want to have a...
But, you know, there was once in particular, you know, where I remember somebody said, no, I don't want to change that. And that's fine. You know, it's your piece of art. You don't, you know, you own it.
Yeah. Right. Oh, well, very exciting. I was gonna. I think we're wrapping up, and I know you have a poem that you wanted to share from A Good Hammer. So
okay,
maybe that would be a
This
good time.
The poem is called A Good Hammer, and it's the title poem of the book. Actually, you can see there's two different versions. This one is not only is it handmade, it's also handmade paper. This version was commercial paper, but still a handmade book. But so anyway, this one has a couple of misprints in it. That's why I use it as the reading book. But A Good Hammer. Blessed are the splinters, the little cuts that never bleed, the dark blue-black fingernails. At 53, you long for more hours as a carpenter, nailing and planing, a pencil behind your ear, sawdust on your shoes, the clean, sweet smell of fresh-cut lumber in the basement, the backyard, in the new attic bedroom. Eager for that brief moment when you close the toolbox and exhale, the good and strong of completion, something your sons can sit on, climb up, or walk under. What is a marketing manager anyway? A son should see his father's work, see that a sound joint fitted in the wind will hold against rain and hail and time, should remember his father's sweat. Learn the only tool he needs, finally, is a good hammer, love he can hold in his hand.